The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff and management of WWDB-TV. Hot topics, food, fun, entertainment, and serious business. Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese, another spectacular episode with somebody who's out there making big changes in our community and hoping that you'll help him make even more changes. My guest today is retired North Las Vegas Police Lieutenant Tim Bedwell. He's got an impressive resume. He joined North Las Vegas Police in 2001, and for some reason I thought you'd been there longer than that, but as a reporter, I saw him all the time, so it's just, he was like, family. He retired last year after working in administration, information, field training, public information, an officer in Yuma and Arizona before that, and 20 years in the Marine Corps. You must have started as like in elementary school or something, or what?
Thank you. Yeah, let's go with that. I like that.
So you thought about running. You're going to be running against incumbent Sheriff Joe Lombardo.
Correct.
And you're the first person to actually come out and say that you're going to run for sheriff, the first one so far to think about this. You thought about running back in 2013, changed your mind. Why?
Well, so I have 42 years in public service.
Right.
And as that all progressed, as a professional, you always kind of see where do you think you're going to be at the end of your time of being able to make change. And my goal was to reach as high as I could to be able to make as much change as possible. 4 years ago, I considered running, and I had thought about it a little bit before that, but it really wasn't the right time,
right,
for a variety of reasons. Now I feel that the need is there, and that I have the skill sets to fill what's lacking.
Okay. And I asked your campaign manager for a list of the 5 areas because I can get off track really easily. So I want to make sure that you get your campaign message out since we've got this time here. So you've got 5 areas that you really want to touch on. The first one is when I ask about you making changes, what do you think needs to happen for Metro and the challenges that the police department is facing? The first one that you put on your list was to rebuild trust and legitimacy. What does that mean?
Before I do that, I have to get you back. We do go back a long ways.
Right.
And you're not the only one that thinks I've been in the Valley longer than I really have. I actually have Metro homicide detectives that think I worked with them in 92 and 93 sometimes.
That's fantastic.
So that's good, but we did really work a lot together, especially in that 2004, 5, 6 time frame, and there was a lot going on back then. But,
yeah.
So one of my goals is to rebuild the legitimacy of Metro. And when I say that, I think we're at a point right now where the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department doesn't quite have the glimmer that it had for a long time. And I believe there are really, really good police officers. There are brilliant minds at Metro. So when people ask me what I want to do, I want to bring outside ideas. I want to bring change. But really, to be clear, I'm not bringing any outside ideas. The ideas already reside in Metro. I want to empower the people that are in Metro to be able to be a part of the decision making, so that the ideas that come up to me as the sheriff, I pick the best ideas, not really necessarily where they come from or who the person is that's presenting them. I want the best ideas. And I, as a leader, have always surrounded myself with people who think differently than I, that don't always just come in with the same idea I had. No, we're on the same page, we can move forward. No, I want people who will challenge me, who will challenge the status quo, so that we can bring the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department forward. They haven't ever brought in an outside person. Right. And, large companies worldwide bring in new people to foster new ideas. But my point is, the ideas are already there.
Right.
They just need leadership.
Get good people. And let's take a look at, just as we're going to go down this list too, but you just touched on that briefly. the public perception of Metro, not the work that Metro is actually doing, but the public perception of Metro. We saw a record number of homicides in this last year. There's been some speculation that that has a lot to do with our population explosion, not necessarily that Metro is doing a bad job, but that we just have more people. A similar criticism that's been made of the Clark County School District. I think people who've followed me over the years know I'm a big defender of CCSD because I, as a reporter, have seen the challenges of just the sheer number of bodies. Forget whether we're spending money or not. The sheer number of bodies that are coming into the school district with, no families or no food or no clothes or no supplies. So that's one thing. But in Metro's case, can we hire enough cops? Are more police officers the answer to things like this homicide rate, which was just amazing, the number of homicides, 171 last year, the most ever since 1990.
Right, and let's clarify one thing. That 171, which is a record, doesn't include the 58 people that were killed on October 1st.
So we're talking higher.
And I think it's disrespectful for the numbers to come out from Metro and not include those people. Those were murders. They count. And they also should count into how we deploy forces. So when we talk about the numbers of police officers, let's talk about how they are utilized. One of the things that Metro has, just as late yesterday, has come out and admitted that the gang problem is way beyond what they had been telling us that it is. So the MS-13 gang has done double-digit homicides in the past year. Most of those homicides in the last 45 days.
Right.
So one of the issues that came up is, against the better wishes of personnel in Metro, the sheriff decided to decentralize the gang unit.
I remember that. Okay.
Well, that was a mistake.
Right.
So my concern is there are other units, excuse me, there are other units that were decentralized as well, including investigative forces.
Why?
Well, I think the sheriff's idea was that if they were tied to each of the area commands, they would be able to report to that captain and have better control over what happens in that area command. The problem is, from my perspective, on a global scale, when you take a unit like a gang unit or a homicide investigative unit, if you don't keep it cohesive where they see each other every day, and then they go out and report to the different areas where there is a problem, you will not have the combination of intelligence coming in that you should, because they're like spokes of a wheel.
Right.
You don't want the forces out here. Those are the frontline troops. Your special assignment people should be in the core, where everything comes to. So my concern with the homicide rate, clearly the murders that were gang related have been a part of this explosion in homicides. But also we have a rise in other crimes as well. So one of the first things I will do in my first 30 days is review the decentralization plan and potentially bring back the units that need to be brought back.
What was the idea behind even doing that? I just remember vaguely, because I wasn't really following this story, reporting on this aspect of Metro, but I got the sense that there was a perception that we needed more patrol officers and more boots on the streets in the neighborhoods, as opposed to having these groups of specialized police officers.
Well, that's potentially part of it, and I think it's a little up in the air as to what the idea was. Okay. And one of the things I will do differently is I like to collaborate. I like to collaborate both within the organization and with other agencies outside the organization, other community groups, bring them all together so that we make a decision like that. However we go, we want people to know why we went that way and understand the plan. I don't understand this plan fully, but I know that the sheriff has admitted that the gang unit was a mistake, potentially a disaster. So I want to look at all of that decentralization, and the likelihood is I'll bring it back. And I say that because there are many voices within Metro that didn't want to decentralize to begin with,
yes.
And they want it brought back.
Yes, exactly. Okay, the next item on your list, improve public communication. You've touched on that a little bit. Mm-hmm. You're critical of the way Metro handled October 1. Because I was sitting there on my knees half the time, just with all the other reporters. There were so many reporters in the room because it was such a big story. I just didn't get the sense that there was a lot of the sheriff and his folks were talking to us, and the politicians were coming in for the photo ops, and I'll be critical of that. When people just come in for the photo ops and they leave and they don't answer any questions, so then why were you here?
Right.
Just to make it look like you care, but if you really cared, you'd be doing town hall meetings, you'd be out walking the streets, talking to people, going to neighborhoods, the same way they do when they want someone's vote. Right. But I didn't see that. I saw a lot of folks flying in, flying back out, and the sheriff's just out there. Did you feel, you talk about improving public communication, is that something that you're looking at too, is getting officers? I know that you've been a part of that in North Las Vegas, of getting officers on the streets. I think I've told people, if you have to, it's terrible to get a traffic ticket anywhere, but if you get one in North Las Vegas, the police officers actually smile at you. It's like not a terrible experience. You don't want to do it, but if it should happen. But that's something that I saw happening over the years that you were there, was a real dedicated effort to improving the interaction with the people who live in North Las Vegas,
Right.
because there was a time, I know growing up, when that was not the case.
Right. And that's part of it, Rikki. I do believe that it's really important for the community to feel a relationship with the police officers that speak on the department's behalf in regard to any problem. But I also think that on a greater scale, we need to be responsive when we're challenged.
Yeah.
If you challenge me on something and you believe I've done it wrong, I need to stay engaged. I need to learn what problems you feel are there. We need to work through those things. I can't back away from you. But also, the sheriff is the top law enforcement official in Clark County. He's everyone in the county's sheriff. Whether you live in North Las Vegas or you live in Henderson or anywhere in the county, your sheriff is the sheriff.
Right.
And the sheriff is the person that can come out and calm us down when something bad happens, give us information that is truthful, tell us if there's something that he can't talk about, and ultimately reveal what's going on in a way that the public feels safer. My biggest concern is people tell me they don't feel safe here now. And a lot of that is because of October 1st, and I believe we could have done a much better job communicating with the public, letting all of us know what happened, the key aspects of what happened, to not have that change dramatically as the dialogue went along, and cutting off contact after 15 days is a bad idea for any CEO of any organization, but certainly for the person who we look to for our safety. He needs to be in front of this problem, and I think there's still time for the sheriff to come back and capture that.
But isn't there a fine line, Tim, between getting information out and maybe getting the wrong information out? And the reason why I bring this up is we saw with October 1, some information ended up being not true. And then we saw that under Gillespie, where some information that was rushed to judgment and innocent people were, maligned because there was this is what happened. As a reporter, we're always going to be just, give me the information right now. But sometimes, isn't maybe a little bit of distance, a little bit of delay, maybe the better side of valor?
Well, one of the reasons, and you spoke about this earlier, one of the reasons when I ran the public information officer in North Las Vegas, one of the reasons we had such a good relationship, and I think the public recognized it very clearly, was that we gave a lot of information early.
Yes, that's so true.
But we only gave the information we knew for a fact was a fact. Now, I knew any day, and my chiefs that I worked for in my period of time there knew that any day, if I pushed that line too far and I gave out bad information, the chief of police could come out, fire me, and tell us the truth.
Right.
So when a CEO, when the commander of a police force comes out in public and gives information early on in an incident, it needs to be the facts. If we're going to get into suppositions, it's good to bring someone closer to the investigation, a captain, a lieutenant, who can then give, this is an angle that we're working, but it's not necessarily exactly the facts.
Right.
So that 2 weeks later, when we learn that the timeline is different, if the chief wants to come out or the sheriff wants to come out and say, this is what we meant when we said this, and these were some things we thought, but we've discarded.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that the public expects us not to tell them things that we can't that would jeopardize an investigation.
Right.
They don't expect that. You and I would battle over information.
Right.
But the fact was, I would give information that I knew at the time was true.
Right.
And I would tell you, no matter how much you beat me up, I would tell you, come back next week, and I might have more.
I was notorious for asking the same question 15 different ways, trying to
Right.
get like some new angle, and then finally realizing this is all he's going to say. But knowing that what you did say, I could put it on the air that night and not have
Right.
to worry about, making a retraction the next day. I mean, we're always, looking for more.
Right.
And you're right. If it might be as just as simple as if you only have 3 facts, then just give those 3 facts. But at least talk to everybody every day so that they know
Exactly.
these are the 3 facts we have from yesterday. We're looking for some more facts, but we don't have them right now.
Right.
And then people will say, oh, okay, well, at least we know you're on the job. Yeah, and I understand what you're saying about responding. Now, provide county-wide leadership. Do you think that people, you just said this a couple of seconds ago, I don't think a lot of people realize that we only have one sheriff and he's in charge of everything. They know that there are different mayors for different cities, and different municipalities have different, politicians running it, or county commissioners, their councils. But there's just one sheriff.
Right.
That's it, and he's everybody's sheriff. So do you think that he's not doing enough to provide leadership? Is there something that you would do differently?
Well, I've had people say to me, I'd love to vote for you, but I live in North Las Vegas. I'd love to vote for you, but I live in Boulder City. And I say, you can vote for me. You only have one sheriff in Clark County.
Right.
So Metro doesn't patrol in Henderson.
Right.
The Henderson Police Department does.
Exactly.
However, that doesn't mean that there's not still a responsibility for the sheriff, for the safety of people of Henderson.
Right.
Because he's still the sheriff of the entire county.
Right.
So when things go wrong in any of these other jurisdictions, Metro responds. And I will tell you right now, Metro responds. I'm not going to go in there and tell them to respond, because Metro always is on the spot. When there's a major incident anywhere in the county, Metro goes.
Right.
What I'm talking about is at the leadership level. For example, I've talked about putting a police officer in the middle schools and elementary schools. A lot of people don't know there are no police officers in elementary and middle schools in Clark County. The 96 school police officers that are assigned are in the high schools,
Right.
2 per high school. So we have way too many schools with no police officer. The sheriff's response to me in the paper was that that's the school district's problem. They need more resources. To me, that's not the way you handle it when you're the sheriff of the county. His responsibility and my responsibility when I'm elected won't end at the fence at a school. I have a responsibility for your children, your grandchildren, when they go to school, and I'll do everything I can in my power to protect them. So that's one element of leadership countywide that I will provide, but it's more all-encompassing. It has to do with being a part of the relationships with in every part of the county, and people knowing that you're their sheriff and you're there to help them, to provide safety, to help their agency if they need the help, which Metro does provide a great deal to the other agencies.
Right.
People need to know that's coming from the sheriff.
Do you think that the sheriff spends enough time in the community? I mean, whenever there's a big event, and I'm just speaking from a anchor reporter's perspective, we'll come to the press conferences that are held at Metro's headquarters, but I don't see him doing a lot of stuff out at actual town hall meetings. I mean, I'm not sure if that's even a requirement, but just that physical presence of being out there, especially even for large events here in town.
You know me, Rikki.
Yeah.
You think I'm going to be at those events?
Yes, I do.
That is exactly.
I know this.
You just answered my question for me.
Okay.
Because that is exactly the leadership as sheriff I'll bring to Clark County. You deserve it. That's what you pay a sheriff for. I'm not going to step on the toes of the police chief in Henderson or in North Las Vegas. They have a hard job. They do their thing, but they'll always know I'm right there. And if they have a community event, I'll show up there. I'll call up and I'll just say, hey, I'm coming to that if you're okay with it.
Right.
I want to be a presence. I want to sit by you and show that we're a solid force.
Yeah.
That's leadership. That's exactly what's
Yeah.
encompassed in
And
that.
people want to meet the sheriff. I
And
mean,
people want to.
I know this is going to sound very shallow, but they're both really good-looking guys. So, I mean, what are you going to do about that? Here's another one on your list. Revamp procurement and contracting. Now, what does that mean?
Now I'm red.
Only on Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese would I talk about the sheriff's candidates as, ooh, they're hotties.
I'm right here.
I know.
I'm just right here.
I know. And
What
your
was the
wife is right here.
My wife's-
Michelle's over there going, oh, she's giving me a thumbs up. She agrees.
Yes,
she
dear.
knows. And so is Robert Martinez, your campaign manager, who I knew back in the days when I was at Channel 3.
He's not here. He's just waving you
He's
off.
just waving. So revamp procurement and contracting. What is that?
So it's pretty well known throughout the valley that Metro made a big mistake with the radio system.
Oh, that was a disaster.
Right. Now that's an example of really poor vetting of a contract. However, I'm not going
And
to...
explain to people what happened with that. They went out and they bought these very expensive radios, this system that did not work.
Right.
It was terrible.
Right, approximately $40 million or whatever.
Yeah.
So lots of money, big deal. A lot of people are concerned about something like that. Now, I'm not going to say that should never happen.
Right.
Okay, things go wrong. In that case, that probably needed a better understanding technologically, and not just that issue, but there are other issues with regard to the contracts that Metro does, making sure that if we have a contract for something, that it is first afforded to any company in the state who has that capability. We should not be going out of state for anything that there's an in-state alternative for, and I know that happens at Metro. I will change that. That's a no-brainer to me. So what we'll do is, one of the first responsibilities is of the sheriff is to manage the public money as efficiently and effectively as possible. So it's impossible for me to come in front of the public and say, I need more money because I made some mistakes in a contract. I can't have those kind of mistakes.
But don't you have oversight by the county commissioners who serve on the Fiscal Affairs Committee?
Right. But the sheriff runs the sheriff's department.
Okay.
You have to do that in accordance with the law and with the policies that are in place. The purse strings are kept by the commission, and that's done in cooperation with the city, the county board of supervisors or commissioners and the city council. But the money and the way to spend the money is the sheriff's responsibility.
Okay.
Picking a radio contract or who you're going to contract to do your dispatching system, that is something that is done by the sheriff. It's the money that needs to be approved on the other hand. But quite frankly, you don't want a city council or county commissioners running the police department.
That's so true.
You want the sheriff doing that. You want the sheriff to do it efficiently, and everyone needs to trust that it's done in the best way, and we don't have to buy 2 radio systems to only have one at the end of $100 million.
Quite a few years ago, I was talking to a county commissioner, and I was being very, very critical of her and this type of issue. And I thought, you guys are just wasting money. And she said, I love it like when you're first starting as a reporter and you think that you know everything and you can't spell cat, and they don't say that to your face. But she said, come up to my office, because I was critical of some staff recommendations, and she showed me the background information for all of the different committees that the county commissioners serve on. And then later, because I was so intrigued, I went to the city and I said, let me look at that. She said, we don't have time. We could barely get through. I mean, there was one stack for just one agenda item that was just obscene. There was so much information. He said, we have to rely on our staff. And so to a degree, I hear what you're saying too, is they've also got to rely on the sheriff to say, look, I've vetted this information and I think that this is legitimate.
Right, and ultimately, I certainly would not sit here and say that I'm going to read every line of every budget item. You hire experts to do that. But that does not give me the ability to say it's not my fault if it doesn't happen, because the buck lands at the sheriff. Right.
Now, your 5th item is review, reverse, special assignments, decentralization. What does that mean? Is that going back to what you were saying about, the gang unit? And of course, you guys, this is going to be on our website and on the YouTube and Roku, so you can see it forever. But on this day when we're taping, it's on the front page of the paper. When I first saw MS-13, just because I'm walking out of 7-Eleven, my first thought was this is a terrorist group in some other country. Right. And so, of course, being too cheap to pay for the RJ, we just got in the car. Hey, that's That's why God invented cell phones. Got in the car and actually pulled the story up and was just shocked at the timeline of all these homicides, because I hate to say it, but I think we're getting to the point where we're so, not deadened, but it's just like there's like shootings all the time, and then we've had our mass shooting, which still dwarfs all of the mass shootings that have happened since then. But to get your head around 58 people, when I found myself writing that down, that number still today, 58 people, and we've had 12 here and 3 here, etc., around the country since then. But we had 58, and we're still reeling. I think we're still numb to that number.
We are.
And what could we have done in any way, shape, or form to prevent that? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because another thing that was on the front, it wasn't on the front page of today's paper, but one of the headlines is that a retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens is calling for a repeal of the Second Amendment in an essay on the New York Times website. Is gun control legislation, because now we know that Paddock was just, come on, he was armed to the teeth. He had more guns than Rambo. It was like ridiculous. But would gun control have done anything to save those 57 lives? Because he was one of the people killed in the shooting.
Well, actually, I think it's 58.
Is it 58?
Yes, ma'am.
So he's not counted as that number? Oh, okay.
So there's
All right.
58 victims.
58 victims.
Now, let's talk about the fact that murdering those people was against the law.
Right.
So having those firearms there against the law wouldn't have mattered to Paddock. He didn't care. He went in there with the sole purpose, apparently, of committing this heinous crime, and as cowardly as possible, so he would be as far away and not have to see the faces of his victims. But there are many ways for us to try and prevent those kind of things. Our best efforts at preventing that type of situation come from intelligence. So one of the things that's lacking on the Strip is having police officers that work those casinos do two things: be the same officers regularly, so from one area command, and when I'm sheriff, I'm going to put an area command that's specifically solely dedicated to the Strip.
I don't know why because I guess Metro headquarters is not that far from the Strip.
That shouldn't
but
matter.
There's nothing on the Strip.
But Rikki, the reason we put an area command in a certain area is so that area command works the problems of that area, and the officers know the problems and they can work solutions. We don't have that on the Strip. The other thing we don't do is you don't see officers walking through casinos. I'm not going to say that that's something that's somehow forbidden or an agreement between the sheriff and the casino owners, but I think it's a mistake. Because if you have police officers that are coming by, just like when they go into a 7-Eleven or a dollar store,
Right.
Hey, how's things going? Okay, but there's this guy that's kind of creepy, been hanging around. If we had that same kind of intelligence in the hotel where we were talking to the valets and they go, yeah, there's a guy took like bunches of bags up to the 32nd floor. I don't know what that's about. And I'm not saying that would have happened. Don't get me wrong. I'm not second guessing what happened in the past. I'm saying let's do this in the future.
Right.
But we really can't learn from the past, and we'll be destined to relive it unless we know what happened and learn the lessons of it. So to me, one of the lessons is already something that I had already professed. There should be officers using the same community policing techniques on the Strip that we use in other neighborhoods.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to. And if there's some kind of a problem between the casinos, they don't feel that they want uniformed police officers walking through their casinos, well, then we're going to have a public discussion on that. And let's find out what the people want. It's private property.
Right.
But at the same time, the sheriff's department has a responsibility to protect the people there. And I think we can reach an accommodation where people will be glad to see Metro cops coming through their casinos.
I live in Northwest Area Command, and I can tell you from my own experience, those folks get out there and they're on a first name basis with people. I see, like the canine guys, getting out and talking to people. There's not this, I don't know, it's just normal,
Right.
for them to get out of their car and just talk to somebody. I've actually I had a whole conversation with a guy. Didn't realize I was going to have him on my show a couple of weeks later, and he brought his dog. I said, "Didn't I just
That's
run
cool.
into you at 7-Eleven?" And then we had this whole conversation, and the lady coming out of the store had a conversation. It was just so normal, and I thought, this is kind of cool. There's not this feeling of fear or anxiety or apprehension. At least in my area of town, it's a very, I wouldn't say close per se, but it's an understanding of they're there to do a job, and people aren't afraid to actually have a conversation with a police officer.
Once we defang people that we tend to be a little afraid
Right.
of, we realize that we have much more in common than we have opposed.
Right.
And that's really the key to it. You really hit it right on the head. When you run into those people on this casual basis, if all you ever see is a police officer when he shows up to say, "What's the facts? What happened? I need to find out now because I got to go fix a problem."
Right.
If that's all you ever see the police officer, that's all you think of him. But if he or she is coming and you see him in just a casual experience, then the next time, if they are in that mode, you understand why.
Right.
Oh, this is all business today because he's got
Right.
something you got to take care of.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I don't want to just sort of belabor it, because we were talking before the show of, I have to remind myself, just like I thought that you'd been here so much longer than you have, because I just saw you so much. For some reason, I was doing like a lot of North Las Vegas stories. But the reason why North Las Vegas is near and dear to my heart. I used to say I am a Las Vegas girl, but recently I was having a conversation with a friend, and she said, "Rikki, you grew up in Nellis and you went to Rancho. You're a North Las Vegas
Right.
girl." I thought, wow, that is true. So I have a whole understanding of the history of North Las Vegas, and one of the things I do want to bring up, and we don't have to go into a lot of detail, there was a time, back when I was in high school, a long time ago, not as long as long before Tim got to town, North Las Vegas had just a terrible reputation. There was a real problem with the police officers and a lot of mistrust in the community. Just like I joked earlier and said, if you get pulled over by North Las Vegas police now, it's never pleasant to get a ticket, but it could be worse. At least they smile as they write it down. You've seen, even in the time you've been there since 2001, just a remarkable change in the rank and file. How did you guys pull that off? Because now, when I'm out and doing stories in North Las Vegas, there's none of that. In fact, there are people they're new in town, they don't know that North Las Vegas ever had a problem.
Well, interestingly enough, North Las Vegas hired an outside chief in 2002 who didn't come from the inner ranks
Right.
of North Las Vegas. And what that did is that set the course of the North Las Vegas Police Department on a different keel. I got brought up to be the public information officer. I worked directly for him for the rest of his time there. And not only did he set the culture on a reboot, he also instilled the next generation of leaders, who then became Chief Chronister, who served for a very long time as the chief, who was an insider. But that culture was changed. Education was pushed. We did more cultural diversity things.
Right.
The idea of actually getting out and talking to people in a
That was
non-confrontational
a big thing
way.
that I saw. Oh my God, you guys
Exactly.
were going to rallies. Every time I turned around, there was like a North Las Vegas police presence.
Right.
It wasn't just because you were getting pulled over for anything.
Exactly.
It was, you guys were showing up at these events and praying. That you've got there are like several pastors who are involved in
Right.
the anti-violence movement, and showing a cooperation between law enforcement and different agencies, both secular and religious, here in the valley.
Right. So, and basically that's the same things we've already talked about. And let me be clear, there are brilliant people at Metro. There are already very good community efforts going on in Metro. I think they were better, not too distant past, and I think they can be better in the future. I think Metro needs the leadership that will allow those people to flourish with those ideas. I saw that happen in North Las Vegas.
Right.
It's a much smaller, 1/10
Sure.
the size of Metro.
Sure.
But if you can do it in that cultural surrounding, you can do it in Metro as well. And I'll tell you, I'm going to hit the ground on day one trying to earn the respect and trust of the people in Metro, so that they'll know that my ideas aren't separate from what theirs are. Our goals are the same. They have brilliant people, and I just want to empower them.
Do you think that the rank and file in Metro, though, want to change? I mean, I don't get a sense that people, and of course, not like I'm hanging out with a lot of Metro police officers over coffee, but I don't get the sense that there is a great deal of dissatisfaction with Lombardo.
I think it depends on who you talk to.
Okay.
But I will say this as well. Police officers, like military people, and I've done both for a long time, over 2 decades of both, they don't like change. They're resistive of change. Policing is one of the last things that you can actually force into the future. But it can be done. It's been proven many, many places. New leaders come in from outside in large corporations, large agencies, LAPD, LASO. It happens all over, East Coast, West Coast. But again, I want to make it absolutely clear. I don't believe I'm going to take anything to Metro that they don't already know. And there are things that are my idea that I might get there and people go, no, that there's a better way.
Right.
But collectively, we can be much more powerful.
Right.
And we'll do it.
How important is your relationship, and we touched on it a few moments ago, with the members of the resort corridor and with downtown? You know, because I think that when we take a look at the gaming numbers especially, and the gaming numbers are up, and on one hand, is it the locals who say they don't feel safe? Because in the resort corridor and downtown, we're seeing jumps in revenues where clearly people feel safe about spending their money.
Right. And so I've spent a lot of time downtown lately, a lot of time. And I've spent time with Mr. Joshi, and he's talked about what's going on in the resurgence that's happening at Neonopolis and on the Fremont Street. Those things are happening. They're moving forward. We have to adapt to that, because any little, and I don't want to use, let me just say blight. Any sort of blight that is there is magnified the more people that you have coming in.
Right.
So when you bring in more and more and more attractions, which they're doing down there, great food, I go there if you haven't been in a while, it's fantastic. But as you're bringing all those things in, then any bad element is going to try to take advantage of it. So we have to adapt. We have to bring in more officers. But to your point, I'm not going to speculate on what the Metro officers think of me or the sheriff. I'm not running against the sheriff. I'm running for the office.
For Metro.
But one thing I know about people in policing and in the military, when that change happens, January the 7th of 2019, and I become sheriff, everybody there will know I'm the sheriff, and they'll do their job in the same manner they have. The message I want to give them is, I want to expand their voices. No matter which clique or whatever they may be in, let's all be one agency. Let's all decide together how to make it better.
All right. Your message as we wrap up here, that was a great message, but how can people get in touch with you, maybe get involved in your campaign?
So you can get in touch with me through bedwellforsheriff.com, which is my website. I answer on social media. I'm Tim Bedwell on Facebook. I'm Tim Bedwell on Twitter. I respond to questions that are given to me, even if you come across pretty negative. If you're not cussing at me, but if you have a question,
Right.
I'll respond to it.
Right.
No matter where you seek me out on social media or stop me on the street or call my campaign, I'll answer your question.
Right. Do you think Metro is doing a good enough job right now, or well, in terms of answering those individual complaints? Because whenever we do have something big like 1 October, you can see social media lighting up. But a lot of times, just like when I'm using my example of Northwest Area Command, where I see these officers having conversations that have nothing to do with law enforcement. It's just having conversations with another human being.
Right.
And then maybe as part of that, I had this problem in my neighborhood. These conversations, how do you facilitate that valley-wide?
Well, I'll tell you right now that I have very diverse discussions throughout a day. I'll speak to a gun rights group at in the morning. I will speak to a group of educators in the afternoon, and some of the same subjects are discussed. Today I spoke with some people about immigration issues, and here I am talking to you about the broad range of things. I will say this: I think there is a desire for change at the sheriff level in Las Vegas. I think people want to turn away from what happened, turn the corner, move forward, and know that there's some new ideas in play that we'll avoid the mistakes of the past, that their children will be safe. And even though I'm talking to very diverse groups, there's much more commonality in our goals.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's differences in our methodology, but our goals are the same. People want to feel like they're safe. They want their children to be safe. They want the children to feel safe. We talk about education all the time, and the poor education in Nevada. It's not a poor education in Nevada. We're ranked 50th, but they're brilliant children come out of our state.
Right.
But they need to feel safe at school. That's something I can do, and I can do with the power I have right now, or I will have January the 7th. As sheriff, I could right now do things to make the school safer and make parents feel safer.
Well, and I think that's the part of our shock that we're still traumatized is you just don't think in a million years that going to a music festival is going to endanger your life, and you don't think that your child going to school is going to endanger their life. No. Bullying aside, I've got members of my family who work for CCSD, and back to your thing earlier about police at the elementary and junior high level, I was one of those people who was opposed to school police overall.
At all, right.
Until I started talking to relatives who were like saying, you don't know what these little kids are bringing knives and guns to school, right. And they're pulling them on teachers and they're pulling them on kids. And so there's just an overall, the challenges of law enforcement now are not the challenges that we had when we were kids. They're very, very different. They're very, very specific, and they're very, very dangerous.
They are.
I mean, I think the worst thing that ever happened at Rancho was a trash can fight. I never thought in a million years I'd get shot. I mean, that wasn't even a concept. Who had a gun? Who brought a gun to school? But now it's a different world.
And you also brought up turning the corner. I brought it up. You echoed it. We need to see the public records. The records need to be out. There's no reason that they couldn't have kept aside a group as they went along. It doesn't cost another $500,000 to come up with the records to deliver them to the public. Let's get those records out there. Let's look at what happened. Let's learn our lessons. Let's turn the corner, and let's think forward, not back.
Right, exactly. Tim Bedwell, thank you very much. Retired lieutenant for North Las Vegas Police, running for sheriff against the incumbent Joe Lombardo. And of course, we'll hear from another opponent later on another edition of Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was teasing him before the show. This is the first time I think ever I've seen him that wasn't at a crime scene or who wasn't talking about a crime in general, but he's talking about not crime, but safety, which I think those are two entirely different ideas. When you talk about what are the concerns of people right now, right. They're not necessarily thinking I might get hurt, but they're thinking on a more positive way, how am I safe? Right. And how do I stay safe? And who's going to help me get to that point?
Right.
Yeah, so, well, let's see you when it gets closer to the actual election.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for being my guest today. And thank you for joining me on Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese.